Hello and welcome to the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anyone that wants to start, develop, or maximize an existing solo or small group performing career. I have over 50 years of live performance experience. I will include not only my tips, but the tips from other hardworking pros in their neck of the woods. The idea, of course, is to make this actionable, entertaining, and profitable. If you like what we do, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Let's get going.
Guitar Made Simpler, an intelligent approach, is the first all-new guitar method in years. Riley Wilson, veteran guitar teacher, writer, and performer, has taught this same material successfully to thousands of students since 1987. This logical approach will help anyone begin mastering the world's most popular instrument. A combination of formal notation with guitar tablature and included MP3 disc guarantee your success. Online video by the author demonstrating performing examples slowly and correctly. Start making real progress on the guitar. Order your copy today at guitarmadesimpler.com.
First, I'd like to address my appearance on this podcast. Like everything else, this podcast is a work in progress. I usually color my hair for gigs, shave, and use makeup even for shows. I say this because I just turned 70 a month ago, and while I look younger for my audience as I perform, I find it necessary for some help to do that. Most of my shows, ironically, are for people ages 25 to 50 or 60. However, I want to be real and address this as I think it's important to look your best and do your best anytime you're charging people to perform. I also want to remind everyone the counsel from my friend David Fortune's episode of the podcast to be sure and take notes when you listen to this. Sometimes it only takes one idea to completely change the trajectory of your musical career. I've had some marvelous guests on the Band of One podcast over the years that have not only shared terrific intel that have helped me as well as a lot of other musicians. I also recommend sharing it with other musicians, whether they're in a full-blown group or performing solo or whatever. Remember, most of us that have been profiled on this podcast have been playing for decades. So there's a lot of information that will work with you, whether you're playing in a small group or solo or not. I mentioned before on this podcast that one of my favorite quotes about success came from Harvey Diamond, the co-author of the 1980s classic book Fit for Life. In it he says that success leaves clues, and I always add, so do failures. So, a little bit of intel, begin taking notes. One of the great blessings of the 20th century are computers. Now in the 21st century, we can get information from an iPhone, a laptop, a pad, whatever you want to call it, within a moment's notice. The bulletin board, or BBS, of the 1990s has been replaced with things like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. I highly recommend joining users groups for things like solo performers, backing track users, small group entertainers, etc. Recently, I was amused at a post on Facebook page where someone was trying to amass more than 100 songs before going out to look for work. I can't recommend this in any way, shape, or form. For example, like my buddy Walt Pitts, I also do coaching to help solo performers and small groups get off the ground and then polish what they do. For you older performers that simply want to begin doing solo gigs, I agree with my friend Sam Baker. Start with the nursing homes. With older residents, and particularly for those in Alzheimer's or memory care, you can make as many mistakes as you possibly can in a 30-minute or 1-hour performance, and no one will say anything about it. Material is important, but it's not the only thing. If you're playing in an Alzheimer's or memory care facility, you might only need a half a dozen songs that can be played twice within an hour. The only people that are going to notice are the people that hired you, and as long as you're good on those songs, they'll be happy to have you back. Remember, finding good, reliable performers is a challenge all over the country, wherever you are. There are several songs that I play at retirement facilities that I would have a hard time not playing simply because people like it so well. Early on, it's important to simply get out there and start playing shows. I heard a story that Glenn Frey came up to Bob Seger at a gig in Detroit in the late 1960s and mentioned that he wanted to start making records. Seger asked if Frey wrote songs. Frey said he did, but they were awful. Seger told him, "Keep writing and they'll get better." Glenn Frey clearly took that advice to heart and had great success. Zig Ziglar, the famous motivational speaker and writer, once said, Anything worth doing is worth doing badly until you develop the skills to do it better. Most performers in groups that begin from the ground up are generally playing out within a year. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to land that initial show. Try and play the first 5 gigs within the first year you begin booking dates. And please, don't wait until your act is perfect. Just get out there and start selling what you do. Have you listened to my 2 podcast episodes with Brad Richards? If not, go back and listen to those right now. Brad had never ever played with other musicians, but simply thought he was adequate enough to get out there and play and sing at a retirement facility. He started booking work in Minnesota and got busy enough to keep him and his clients satisfied. I first became aware of him when, as a writer at Vintage Guitar magazine, he sent me his promo package that he sent to all nursing home facilities. This was 30 years ago. It was impressive, and he was the one that got me on the idea of doing this in the first place. As I mentioned in that episode, he was a big influence in getting me to pursue that line of work. Now there are booking agents across the country that specialize in just booking retirement communities. Remember, the baby boomer generation numbers in the millions, and those folks are well into their 60s or older now. If you're willing to consider performing for that kind of audience, I can promise you there's work like that in your town too. Now, let's put first things first. Are you a singer? If so, everything you do supports your voice. That means having a quality microphone, as well as a quality sound system to deliver your vocal at the very best you can. It does not mean spend the most money you've got. It simply means to maximize your system to project your voice in the way that's most flattering to you. Now, are you an instrumentalist? Then do your best to be sure that your instrument, be it guitar, saxophone, piano, trumpet, or whatever, is the loudest thing that people listening to you hear. It might mean using a special effect on your instrument, like some chorusing or echo. Compression and or limiting is often now built into newer acoustic amps and small PA speakers. They'll help you polish your lead instrument, whether that's your voice, guitar, horn, etc. I enthusiastically recommend listening carefully by recording yourself to see what works and what doesn't. I wholeheartedly recommend recording your performances at home to see what works best before you get out there and play too many shows. I've been recording voiceover since the 1990s and usually use a large diaphragm condenser microphone for the bulk of my recordings. Now this has both good and bad points, as the microphone is sensitive enough to pick up anything and everything in the room, not just my voice. Quality voiceovers need an incredibly quiet, treated room, and then simply recording your voice in the style the project is looking for. If you look carefully at photos from the Beach Boys' live concert album from 1964, you'll see that Brian, Carl, and Al are all singing on Neumann large diaphragm condenser microphones. The liner notes mention the Capitol engineers had an incredibly difficult time getting the screams from the girls off of the recording. Now those U87s are incredible microphones, but a poor idea for stage work because they are so sensitive. I've never seen anyone attempt this before or since. Recording mics are generally too sensitive and fragile to be good for regular live gigs. I only mention this because in the last several years, several manufacturers have developed small diaphragm condenser microphones for onstage use. I picked up a used blue Encore 300 microphone about a decade ago, and in fact, it was the same model used on the first season of The Voice on NBC. It completely changed the way I sang lead vocals on a stage and allowed me to become a lot more expressive and dynamic. Because I sing both lead and background vocals in live performances, I needed something that would allow me to back off with less volume and then charge the mic when I needed to be loud. Best of all, because I sing both baritone as well as bass register notes, I really needed something that would give me the low-end push I need on material for people like Johnny Cash or Ernest Tubb. This mic has worked way better than I ever imagined when compared to a plain old dynamic, which I used for most of my career. They are a bit fragile, so you have to be careful with them, but my experience has been nothing but positive. Because I'm a one-stop shop, I'm careful to set up and take down equipment carefully and not just toss it mindlessly into the back of a truck. Now, that's great advice whether you're playing solo or in a large band. If you're an instrumentalist, you probably already have a favorite instrument that you plan to gig with. It may or may not be expensive, but it needs to sound like you. Kenny G, who has made a fortune as a smooth jazz saxophone player, is still playing the same horn he had as a senior in high school. Yes, it's a vintage Selmer, but he's had the same axe over 40 years. Occasionally, outboard gear might be the secret weapon to helping your voice remain out front. I well remember many years ago the first time a guitarist used an Echoplex tape delay for live shows. It sounded full and polished and gave him a sound nobody else was using at that time. Pat Metheny said the first time he plugged into a Lexicon digital delay in Europe, he knew he wanted that to be part of his sound going forward. There are thousands of stomp boxes and special effects you can combine to come up with something that sounds uniquely yours. A word of caution, make sure that regardless of how much jape, as Steve Lukather calls it, you have on your sound, you can still hear the natural tone of your guitar or horn or whatever. Again, record yourself and fine-tune your sound until you're reasonably happy with the results. Gear is important. However, nothing is more important than booking gigs. Brian Tracy points out in his classic The Psychology of Sales program that nothing happens until a sale takes place. Simply put, make the effort to consistently book gigs. Many of us consider this thankless, difficult work. However, you simply have to get bookings to justify having a solo or small group in the first place. I've discussed some excellent sales books in the past on previous podcasts, and also recommend considering taking a basic marketing or sales course at a community college or even something online. A successful friend of mine in a different business once said, "You're either selling goods and services or you're selling yourself." In this case, we're doing both. I profiled online booking sites in prior podcasts and even interviewed a couple of booking agents. And while the majority of my work still comes from those sites, they really aren't enough for most of us to stay as busy as you may want. I've also heard that successful selling is simply transferring your enthusiasm for what you do to someone else, and in the process, making a sale. My wife and I usually begin our day by listening to motivational material, and we just finished the Tony Robbins classic, Unlimited Power. Not only does this book tape series provide great information on how to get leverage on yourself to become successful, he also profiles Colonel Harlan Sanders and how he became the king of chicken. I won't give the story away, but you'll discover he had tremendous perseverance, which led to his tremendous worldwide success. 30 plus years ago, I was in a sales job and got a copy of a Brian Tracy single cassette summary of the Psychology of Sales tape program before I went on sales calls. It helped me to have great success with that job until I realized, wait, I'd rather sell myself playing music than selling another company's products. You might try listening to these kinds of audiobooks, many of which are found online. My friends Bill Barney and Walt Pitt, both of whom I profiled recently here on the Band of One, both have sales backgrounds, which has helped them remain as busy as they are. If you haven't listened to their podcasts, go back and listen to them once you're done with this one, and take notes as you do. I've spoken about follow-up before, but I had a recent experience I'm still stinging from. I'll share this with everybody because it shows how vitally important it is to follow up with people. I performed for the last 2 years in a row on New Year's Eve for the same client here in Dallas. About May of this year, I got an offer to play an even more lucrative one and spoke with a potential client originally on a Thursday. She seemed to like what I did, and we came to a mutually agreeable price and said they would make the decision the following Monday or Tuesday. I then contacted my past client who gave me the blessing about booking someone else for this year. Then I promptly forgot about the whole conversation with a new client. When it finally dawned on me, I reached out the following Tuesday only to find out she'd booked someone else because I didn't get back to her in time. This was painful because it ended up being almost twice the money I made the last 2 New Year's Eves. Always keep track of your paperwork and always follow up with people. You never know how and when it will turn out, but if you do your best, the gigs eventually will come, and they'll come regularly. First things first, your act might be different than they are for mine. Ask yourself, if you have time to only do one thing for your show this week or this month, what would that be? Then get that one thing accomplished. There's a marvelous story about how Ivy Lee helped a little-known company in Pennsylvania become the biggest steel company in the world. Over a century ago, a Scotsman named Andrew Carnegie was trying to build a business when a man named Ivy Lee approached him with an idea that he said would help him make more productive. Carnegie became impatient and said, "What's needed is a lot less knowing and a lot more doing." Ivy then said, He could show Carnegie in 15 minutes something would have a major impact on his business and his life. Carnegie said, "If you can do so, I'll listen to you and pay you anything you ask within reason." Lee asked Carnegie to pull out a piece of paper and write down on it the 6 most important things he had to do the next day. Once that task was completed, Lee said, "Now number these in the order of their importance." Once this was taken care of, he told him, "Put the piece of paper in your pocket and start with task 1 tomorrow. Stick with it until you're done with it. Then, if you have time, move on to task 2, and so on. Do this every working day and teach your executives to do the same thing, and try it as long as you wish. Then send me your check for whatever you think the idea is worth." The Carnegie interview lasted less than 30 minutes. Within a few weeks, Ivy Lee received a check for $25,000, along with a note from Andrew Carnegie saying it was the greatest business lesson he had ever learned. 2 lessons to be gleaned from this. First, this idea helped Andrew Carnegie develop the world's greatest steel company, United States Steel. This company put Pittsburgh on the map across the globe. Second, look at the logo. The next time you see the Pittsburgh Steelers play football on television, the logo on the side of their helmet is the symbol for U.S. Steel. It might not even exist today without Ivy Lee and this one tremendous idea. Again, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, one great idea can revolutionize your business life and, in fact, your life in general. Begin to make the effort to put first thing first and watch the magic happen. That's all for today. I'm Riley Wilson, and you've been listening to the Band of One podcast. We thank you for doing so. We hope if you have questions about anything that you'll reach out to us. My Facebook page, facebook.com/Band of One podcast. Heck, if you'd like to be on the show or know somebody that would be a good fit, get in touch with me through my webpage, which is guitarmadesimpler.com. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.